thank you for joining us for another episode of Marking the Times. We appreciate you joining us for these weekly prophecy updates and opportunity to answer some questions that you all can send in on Facebook. So we always appreciate the questions you all send in and enjoy answering those. As everybody knows today, if you watch the news at all, there's all kinds of things happening in our world today. I mean, even people who don't really believe in the Bible or don't understand anything about prophecy kind of have this, collective sense that the world's getting near closing time. And there's all kinds of things happening on the geopolitical scene. But one thing that caught my eye this week in the news was over in Congo right now is the second largest Ebola outbreak in history. And, it's kind of flying underneath the radar. There's so many other things happening in the world. But many of you will remember a few years ago in West Africa was the largest outbreak of Ebola in history. In fact, even a couple of people in the United States got it. But over there right now is the second largest, and this is in Congo, and they're sending in extra people. I just read today because it's worsening. And of course, it's just a human tragedy as several hundred people have contracted Ebola, several hundred have died. But it highlights the fact that there are a lot of diseases around today that are new, that haven't existed before, and how many of them are interestingly come from animals. The Spanish flu back in 1918, 100 years ago, I read recently 500 million people got the Spanish flu. Now, not everybody died from it, but that was a third of the world's population. And the reason it spread so quickly at that time, because that was in the time of World War I, people were moving around the world. That's when the world began to really become more mobile. About 20 to 50 million people died from that. And when we see these outbreaks today, they're a lot more fearsome than they used to be, again, because people travel all over the world and these diseases can be spread very quickly. But it's interesting, Jesus himself in Luke 21, in Luke's account of the Olivet Discourse, he says in verse 11, there will be great earthquakes and in various places plagues and famines. There will be terrors and great signs in heaven. So Jesus said one of the signs that will happen and occur and really proliferate in the tribulation period is pestilence or plagues. Now, one of the places that's stated most clearly in the Bible is over in the book of Revelation, Revelation chapter 6, and verses 1 through 8, you have what's called the four horsemen of the apocalypse, these first four seal judgments that are opened there in Revelation 6. But the fourth seal in Revelation 6:7, it says this, and the Lamb broke the fourth seal. I heard the voice of the fourth living creature saying, come. I looked and behold an ashen horse, or literally it's a pale horse, or the word there is chloros. It's the color, kind of a pale green color of a corpse. And Hades was following him. Authority was given to them over a fourth of the earth to kill with sword, with famine, with pestilence, that's plagues, and by the wild beasts of the earth. So we know when the tribulation period arrives, a fourth of the people at one point in time are going to die. We all know what the sword is and famine, and it mentions pestilence, but then it mentions the wild beasts of the earth. And now that word wild beast, it's the first time that word's used in the book of Revelation, the word therion in Greek. It's used 38 times in the book of Revelation. Some think here that the mention here of people are going to die from wild beasts of the earth, that it's diseases that come from animals. AIDS comes from animals, Ebola comes from animals, the swine flu, the bird flu. In fact, I remember several years ago when the swine flu was going around, I saw a headline in a magazine that said apocalypse now, making obviously a joke about that. But the idea that these plagues are going to increase as the end times draw near. Now, my view is when he says the wild beasts of the earth, the other times that the word wild beasts is used in Revelation, it refers to great world rulers, the Antichrist and his henchman, the false prophet. So I think probably the wild beasts of the earth here refers to these rulers that will dominate the world and kill people in the end times. Probably that's the best interpretation within the book of Revelation. But when we see these plagues and pestilence today kind of mushrooming in different places in the world, what's going to happen during the tribulation period is some of these diseases, maybe some of the same ones we see now, are going to spread. They're going to proliferate around the world, and they're going to become global plagues, kind of like what happened back in 1918 with the Spanish flu. Now, again, over in Congo, what we see happening right now with Ebola, people go in, they're able to contain those usually fairly well. But I think to me, they're not the fulfillment of prophecy, what we see today, but they're a faint foreshadow of what the Bible says is coming. So when we look at these countries, we see these outbreaks of these terrible plagues and pestilence there. Think about that proliferating on a global scale, where millions of people die. And in fact, here it says, from the sword, with famine and with pestilence and the wild beasts of the earth, just in this one judgment in the tribulation period, a fourth of the people on the earth are going to die. And of course, one of the things that reminds all of us is we don't want to be here during that time period. And the only way of escape is through faith in Jesus Christ. He's going to come someday and catch his bride away. We want to make sure that we have our faith and trust in him, the one who died in our place on the cross and rose again, so that we won't be here during this time of tribulation that's coming in the future. Well, hopefully we'll see you next time. God bless you. We'll see you then.